Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making this snowman ornament from a Vintage Vogue pattern. I actually made these back in 78 or 79 when the pattern was brand new, and they were a lot of fun. I've always wanted to recreate them, and finally I decided it's January and the Christmas rush is over, so I think I'll take the time to make these ornaments. I intend to make all of the ornaments from this pattern, and if you would like to join me, it's not too hard to locate this pattern. Vogue Santa Pack 1542. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. This is a Vintage Vogue pattern, Santa Pack for 1542. Here's the envelope. Mine is pretty beat up, but these are not hard to find. Just do a search for Vogue 1542 or Santa Pack, and you'll see they do turn up. This is just a typical pattern with instructions. I think there's 4 sheets of instructions, and then tissue paper patterns. There are large patterns because there's a tree skirt and a wreath and stockings, but I'm not interested in those. I just want to make the ornaments. So those are pretty typical. There are also some, transfers. There's white with yellow ink, and I have not been able to get those to work. But since the paper is more sturdy, I found that I can use these just as patterns. So I just pin and cut my shapes from this white paper. And then they have another type of transfer, which is a blue ink, like this dark blue ink. And that one still works, even though it's, 45 years later. And so I have selected the snowman as my first ornament. I made this before when it was a new pattern back in, I think it said 1978. I intend to make these ornaments, following the colors and everything as presented in the pattern, but I might update the techniques a little bit. So the first snowman that I made, I just cut out on the outside of the heavy line, and I discovered that it was just too big. For instance, the hat didn't fit. The hat was too small, and so I had to cut a bigger hat. And then when I put the hat on, then the hat band was too short, so I had to cut another hat band. And so for the next one, I decided I would just trim off the heavy border and use this pattern just on the inside of the line, and that worked just beautifully. So right now what I'm going to do is cut this from fusible interfacing. I fuse it to the back of my white 100% wool felt, and then a second snowman for the back from white felt. I use this color chart. Does it say Weir on it? Anyway, I have this 100% merino wool craft weight felt color chart to select the colors that matched the photo on the front of the envelope. Using black and white, here's black and white and red, and then pink, bright pink, is emerald green, this grass green, the turquoise, orange for the nose, and this dark yellow. So I have these all right here. I've cut out my snowman, but I wanted to show you that these are the pattern pieces that I'm going to use to cut out the other pieces. These are the pattern pieces that I will use to cut out the felt. This, for instance, is the broom. And I know it's hard to see because the ink is yellow on white, so I'm going to go ahead and cut those out and come back and show you what they look like. Here are my pattern pieces. This orange is for the broom, and this green strip is a little decoration on the broom. I have 2 black hats. This little red strip is curled up to make a little berry. There are 2 leaves. This is the hat band. I cut it a little bit long can always cut it off. I don't want it to be short. There are two scarf pieces. The longer one is turquoise, and then the shorter one is this green color. I think it's called grass green. There's a long one and a shorter one. This is the carrot nose, 2 red mittens, and 2 pink cheeks. And again, I use the yellow waxy transfer paper as patterns. It's also important to understand that there's no real seam allowance. These are just sewn wrong sides together, and so when I cut them out at the same time so that they would be as close to the same size as I could get them. Just stitch around the edge with blanket stitch, and then stuff them. That's how they're finished. So there's no turning, there's no seam allowance. It's just wrong sides together when you construct them. Now, there is a transfer for the face, and it does work, and it is pretty helpful. So I'm going to go and do that. I'm using the blue tissue paper transfer to transfer the face placement. This is the piece that I have interfaced, and it's going to be embroidered. The face will be embroidered, so of course, I like to put a little layer of interfacing so that the layer of interfacing prevents the stitches, the ends of the stitches and the carrier threads from showing through to the front. Here's the face transfer. It's on the tissue paper pattern, and you can see there's some bleed through from whatever was next to it. But I could tell this side was brighter, so I put it face down and I ironed it on with the hottest setting on my iron. All right, so I like to do the face first. The face is fun, and it's embroidered. I use 3 strands of floss, the black for the eyes and red for those French knots around the mouth. There is 1 French knot in the center of each cheek, and then 1 right next to the cheek, and then 1, 2, and then there's 1 right next to this cheek, and then 1 here. So you have to have the cheeks down first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to embroider around the edge of these cheeks with matching thread on my sewing machine. I'm going to use that little blanket stitch on my sewing machine. I won't use any adhesive to stick those down because later on I'm going to have to add some embroidery through there. So it is a very small little piece, and it's a little bit tricky, and I already know that it is not going to be perfect. So I'm just going to do the best I can to do a blanket stitch around the edge of each of these cheeks. I'm starting out by pinning those little cheek circles, but I will remove them right away as soon as I get started. My blanket stitch around the edge of those little pink circles is not super neat, but it got the job done. And now I have begun the French knots for the mouth. Just follow the little blue dots on the pattern on the transfer, and there's 1 up here very close to the cheek, and then there's 1 right in the center of the cheek. So I'm just gonna 1, 2, 3, and then reinsert the needle. And then right in the middle of the cheek. 1, 2, 3. I'm using 3 strands of floss. And that's a total of 6 French knots for the mouth. And then I'm going to secure my thread here in the back, right here. Now before I continue with the embroidery, I want to go ahead and get started on the broom, because the broom has to be glued, and I want to be sure that the glue is dry. It's really cute. It's a bamboo skewer. And then I'm going to add some glue and sort of roll this up. And again, I'm just following the instructions in the pattern. Then later on, we're going to add little green strips, but I just want to get this started. I'm using Aleene's original tacky glue, the best glue ever. So first I want to spread some glue on the stick. I think the instructions said around the first maybe 2 inches of the stick. I can't remember. All right, so there's the first little wrap, and I'm going to continue, but first I want to add some more glue along here, like this. I have confidence that because I'm using this nice wool felt, that the glue won't bleed through. So now I'm just going to wrap it tightly all the way to the end. There's nothing much to it. I will add a little bit more glue right here. And then to hold this until it dries, I'm going to insert a couple of straight pins. I'll let that glue dry for, you know, a few minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and then I'm going to add those green strips. All right, so I'll put that aside and we're going to continue with the face. The eyes are next. Okay, I have 3 strands of black floss and a knot in the end. And this is a blanket stitch. I'm going to be making this long stitch here first, not pulling it very tightly. So then I want this big long stitch at the bottom to be kind of in an arch to follow the line of the transfer. So as I do these short stitches, I'm making sure that I sort of lift up this stitch as I reinsert my needle and give it that arched look. Honestly, if you just follow these blue transfer markings, you'll be fine. There's the third one. And then the last one. They have the end stitches not quite as far as the long stitch on the bottom. So you have like a little bit stitching out on either end, but I've made them with these stitches right on the end and they look fine. So I will secure my thread on the back. And by the way, this is another reason why I have the interfacing ironed onto the back. And that is so that any extra bits or knots or whatever won't show through. They won't shadow through to the front. Now I'll just repeat for the second eye. I'll start at one end of that long stitch and then insert my needle here at the other end of the long stitch. The instructions aren't super clear. It just says to work blanket stitches, but I think this is the best way. Then I'm going to come through at the tip of that eyelash, then reinsert below the long stitch. And again, lifting the bottom stitch. So I didn't make it super tight so that it forms that arch. That looks good. Now again, I'll secure this thread in the back somehow. Before I assemble the snowman, I will touch this with a little bit of glue just to make sure it doesn't come apart. Now for the nose looks like this, and the instructions are to overlap these straight sides and stitch them and then add some stuffing and then sort of stitch the open end to the front. Well, you know, when I did that, the nose was just so big. It was like, it was big, and so I can't explain it. And so I think a better way is to sew those straight edges together and then actually stuff and then gather this to, gather this. I'll show you. This is actually vintage thread, Mighty Fine Trimmers thread, number 24. It's kind of like quilting thread. I'm just going to fold this and I will try to make nice, neat, overcast stitches. Okay, I don't need to make these stitches super small. I don't need to make them perfect, but I will try to make them neat. I'm almost to the tip. I think I'll have one more or two more stitches. Then I'm just going to send my needle back through this bit here. That looks good. I'm not going to pull it too tight. And then I'm going to kind of back stitch here where I started. Now I will get some Fiberfill. It doesn't take too much. And stuff it. Wonder if I could use this bamboo skewer. Get that right down to the point. There we go. All right, now I'm going to keep this finger in here holding the stuffing down while I gather up the edge, around the round edge. All right, so now I'm gathering up and then I'm going to try to tuck this edge in as I pull it. Almost got it. There we go. All right, so this is how it looks. I'm going to secure this at the top, but I'm not going to trim my thread yet. Just going to go back and forth a couple of times to get the back end of the carrot nice and flat. I'll place the carrot right on that circle with the seam here at the bottom, like that. So right there. And then we're just going to stitch through with the same thread to the underside. So there's my first stitch. For me, this is the only tricky part. And it's so important. I mean, the snowman needs a nose, right? And this sort of three-dimensional nose is so cute. So I'm just coming up to the edge of the carrot like that, and then right back down to the back. I want to be sure that it's nice and secure. I'm almost done. Maybe one more stitch. I feel like if this ornament were on my tree and one of my grandchildren reached for it, the first thing they would want, they would reach for the carrot. So I want to be sure that it's nice and secure. Now I will secure my thread in the back. So the thumbs are up, and you can see this one. Can you see? Okay, so this one is, I think of it as sort of having this thumb edge parallel with this edge of the outside of the body. And then this one is tilted a little bit down. But the important thing is that this one, I don't know if this is right hand or is left hand, I'm not really sure, but this one we're just going to stitch all the way around. This one actually holds the broom. And so what I like to do, the broom, it's best if it's kind of close to the face. You don't want it out here because it causes problems with balance. So put it up close to the face. Then I like to just take a disappearing marker and make a line right here where I'm going to stop my stitching. I'm going to do a machine blanket stitch all the way around, stopping here, and then back to here and stopping here. And then this one, I'll just go all the way around the edge. I'm going to do this one first, just so I get in the hang of it. The machine blanket stitch should run with the bar of the stitch along the edge of the felt, and then the little legs to come to the inside of the felt. It's a little tricky to get the stopping and the back stitching here, 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 and here. So it doesn't look perfect, but I think it's a good solution. All right, so I'm going to stitch this one first and then this one. This mitten is done. It looks pretty good. It's a little tricky going around all these curves. And now I'm going to do this one and I'll come back and show you. I've done the second mitten. And now I'm going to be sure that, yeah, that's going to be just right. And before I go any further, I think it's time to remove these pins and go ahead and glue on these green little strips. These are just little decorations for the broom. There's one that goes about like that, and then one that goes about like that. It's going to be glued with white glue right there. So I need it to be about this long. It's a little bit messy, but it's kind of fun. This is overlapping a little bit too much, about that much too long. And once again, I'm going to insert a little straight pin to hold it while it dries. Put it about right here. That right to where they meet. And then I'm going to use another straight pin to hold that until it dries. That looks good. Not perfect, but it looks pretty good. Now let's add the hat. There are 2 pieces of black felt for the hat. And I discovered that when I was stitching this together the first time, there's black on the outside, there's white on the inside, and this edge here was showing even after I stitched. So I think it's a little bit smarter just to remove this section. And I just cut it about right here, so there's enough to give the hat to grab onto. So it's about like this. This top edge is about even with that top of the brim of the hat. Hope that makes sense. And then I'm going to blanket stitch just along this curved edge here. Again, blanket stitching on my machine. The instructions call for hand stitching. So of course you can hand stitch, but who's got time for that? I'm taking care that my pieces match up as accurately as I can possibly get them. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to pin the hat here. And here. And then I'm going to do a little black blanket stitch along both pieces, only where the hat overlaps the body. Here's how the blanket stitch looks. You can't even really see it from the front, but you could see it if you look closely. Decorating the hat, there's a yellow hat band, a couple of green leaves, and then there's a little roll of red felt that forms sort of a berry shape. So we need to glue this. And again, it's just I think it's 1/4 inch wide and 2 3/4 inches long. I think it might be a little big. If I were doing it, I might do it smaller, but it definitely has an effect. And if you didn't want to do this, you could always use a pom-pom or something. So I'm going to start rolling it up. You just roll it up into a little coil. I'm going to add a little more glue there at the end. And this is a flat coil. You're not trying to give it any shape, just a completely flat coil. I think I need a little bit more glue right on the end there. There we go. Then we're going to let that dry while we continue. Looks like that. Should I lift it? Here. So next we're going to sew these together. I'm going to start with the black since I have black in my machine, and I'm going to sew down over to here and stop, and then down over to here and stop. So just the hat, the hat pieces together, but with the top open. So this top edge, I'm just going to leave open so I have room to stuff. Then I'll switch to white thread and go all the way around. And again, this will be with the machine blanket stitch. Okay, I've stitched all the way around the edge with my machine blanket stitch. And this top of the hat is open. And remember, I do have that little edge of the white felt there, so I want to make sure I'm reaching in between the 2 layers of white felt. And I'm going to stuff it. So there's no secret to stuffing, just a little bit at a time. I'll probably use a chopstick or something, and you know, it takes a minute like anything, and then I'll be back. All right, the snowman is all stuffed, and I would say that the only, it's not really a trick, just be sure to stuff the neck. You know, you want the neck to be nice and firm. There is a scarf that ties around the neck, so it doesn't have to look super neat, but you just want to make sure that your head isn't flopping around. So at the top, I'm not going to stuff all the way so it's, you know, coming out the top, but I do want the hat full. You might be wondering if you can stuff these little pieces, and you could possibly get some stuffing in there, but I wouldn't bother with that. Now my machine is still on that blanket stitch, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch up the top edge with a black blanket stitch. Now I looked very closely on the cover here, and of course these are all stitched by hand, all the blanket stitches by hand, and I can see that they used white around the black hat. I know it's hard to tell, but trust me when I say there's little white stitches along the top, which is actually kind of cute and charming, but I'm going to stick with the black. There we go. Now the rest of the project is just assembly. I'm going to start with the hat band. I'm going to glue it. I'm not sure if it's exactly the right length, but what I like to do is have the ends overlapping right here where I'm going to put the leaves and the berry. So I think I can cut off a little bit of that. And then again, I'm just going to use white glue. Boop, 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 boop. And then place it kind of right there and all the way around so that they meet at the front on the side there. Good. I'll let that dry for a minute. Meanwhile, the longer piece of the scarf is the blue one. So I'm going to tie that around the neck. But before I pull it tight, I'm going to add this one, this green one, like that. Kind of get that to the middle. Okay, then I'll pull the blue one tight on the side here. It stretches a little bit, and then I'll tie the green one over it. That looks good. Let me check I'm not using the end of the skewer to poke through the fabric. I'm just trying to get it through that slot. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to cut it off first. So how long do I want it? I think I want it not as long as the bottom of the body. There we go. Now this can be secured with glue. Just a little bit of glue here, which I think is a good idea. It's kind of fun that you could take it in and out, but like I say, I wouldn't want my grandchildren playing with it and have that come out. I'm going to twist it so that the seam in the broom is toward the back before that glue dries. Okay, now I'm going to sew through the top with my baker's twine, red and white baker's twine. Always a good choice. And then finally here, where the hat band meets, I have 2 leaves, 1, 2, and the berry. So I just kind of have to decide if I want the leaves going up or one up and one down. I'm going to use hot glue for this. I think I'm going to have the leaves like this and then the berry right in the center. Like that. Let's have a look. And the Vintage Vogue felt snowman is complete. Thank you for watching my video. If you're enjoying my tutorials, please like, share, and subscribe.